Welcome to the Scientific Sense podcast, where we explore emerging ideas from science, policy, economics, and technology. My name is Gil Eapen. We talk with world's leading academics and experts about their recent research or general areas of topical interest. Scientific Sense is an unstructured conversation with no agenda or preparation. We cover a wide variety of domains where new discoveries are made and new technologies are developed on a daily basis. We are most interested in how new ideas affect society and help educate the world how to pursue a rewarding and enjoyable life rooted in science, logic, and information. We seek knowledge without boundaries or constraints and provide unedited content of conversations with researchers and leaders who love what they do. A companion blog to this podcast can be found at scientificsense.com, and this podcast is available on over a dozen platforms and directly at scientificsense.net. If you have suggestions for topics, guests, and other ideas, please send them to info@scientificsense.com, and I can be reached at gil@eapen.info. My guest today is Dr. Gaurav Jain, who is an assistant professor of marketing at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. His research examines how individuals make judgments, estimates, and decisions in the absence of complete information. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Gil. It's my pleasure.
Sure. So I want to start with one of your recent papers, Fluency and Perceptions of Decision Making.
Mm-hmm.
In which you say research consistently finds that fluent stimuli in marketing communications are better liked and more trusted than more difficult to process stimuli. So what do you mean by fluent stimuli?
So basically, fluency stands for the ease of processing any information that you become exposed to. So suppose I just told you this particular definition of fluency. That is information for you. If I had said this information in extremely scientific terms, it would be less fluent for you. In a marketing context, suppose you are reading a particular advertisement, print advertisement for a printer in a magazine. If that advertisement, if the information is very difficult for you to process, it will be less fluent. And there are many ways in which fluency and its opposite, disfluency, can be manipulated by marketeers. The first one is linguistic fluency. It is about the language. So if a message uses a lot of complex language, it becomes linguistically disfluent. If the message uses simple language that people can understand, it becomes linguistically fluent. The second is conceptual disfluency and fluency. As the name suggests, it depends on the kind of concepts that is being tried to explain. If the concept is a very difficult to understand concept, it is a disfluent concept. But most important of all, I should say most important from the marketeer's point of view, is perceptual fluency. Marketeers can play with the font or the background color and foreground contrast and many other aspects, perceptual aspects of the message to make it easy to process by the customers or difficult to process by the customers. So that is known as perceptual fluency. Ease of processing information is fluency. Lack of that ease is disfluency.
Okay. So it makes intuitive sense. You say fluent designs are better from a marketing perspective, and I guess it may have some connection to. There's a general understanding that if the brain takes more power, it tends to not like that. So generally, people like to process information quickly and more easily.
Mhm.
And so this is sort of in the same direction, right? So more fluent.
I
Yeah,
completely agree with you on that, Gil. So basically, we are cognitive misers. By that,
yeah,
I mean that human beings don't like to, spend a lot of cognition on things which can be done with ease. So we don't like to spend a lot of mental power, in your words, if it is
mm,
not required. So yes, for decades, fluency has been shown to increase customers' attitudes. So high fluency is associated with higher customer attitudes.
mm,
And the reasoning behind that is when there is an ease of processing information, people feel a physical effect in their body. That
mm,
effect or that good feeling of processing information really easily is misattributed to the target object. It can be the product, it can be the service, it can be the brand, it can be a person. In this paper, however, in this paper, I have actually shown something which can be seen as the opposite of fluency, that is disfluency. So I were trying to choose a laptop from an electronics store. You have been given three options, or you have zeroed down on three options. And the thing is, the information about all those three options is given to you in a difficult to read font.
mm.
So they are actually perceptually disfluent. Okay. Now,
Yeah,
because the information is disfluent, you will take a lot of time to process that information.
mm,
And because of that, naturally, you will take a lot of time in coming to a decision.
mm,
Now, later on, after a time delay, you will actually like your decision, the result of your decision, much more because you will actually forget the source
mm,
of you will actually forget why you had taken so long to make the decision.
mm,
You will only remember that you had expended a great deal of effort in making that decision.
mm,
And as human beings, there's a lot of research which shows, we value things on which we expend uh, a more effort. And there are many papers. I can name the classic paper of effort justification by Festinger.
mm.
So that was the finding of this study, that in context of choice, if we make things disfluent, people
Right.
over time start liking the result of decision, their decision much more because they forget that they had taken time due to the disfluency. They would,
Okay, so if you have a choice between two
Mhm.
things, one of them is fluent, one of them is disfluent, the most likely choice is going to be the fluent one because of just the cognitive processing needed to make that decision.
Absolutely.
But what you're saying also is that in a situation where both of them are disfluent,
Hmm.
it is likely that the decision maker is going to take more time,
Hmm.
but the decision maker ultimately will be
Hmm.
satisfied with the decision
Yeah,
because somehow the effort spent was justified to actually go through that process.
absolutely. So they will actually value their decision more because they will think, oh, that might be a very well thought of decision. I had taken a lot of time on that decision. So this
Okay.
has a lot of managerial implications for retailers. Now, if
Mm,
you go to an electronics store and they are less concerned about whether you pick up a Samsung Galaxy Book, their new line of laptops, or whether you pick up HP Spectre, or whether you pick
mm,
up Dell Inspiron. But they are more concerned that a customer who has walked in the store should at least pick up one computer.
mm.
And at the same time, you know that electronics store tend to lose a lot of money when customers actually return the product after 8 to 10 days. They
Right.
have to sell it as an open box. They have to sell the product as an open box, and they tend to lose a lot of money on that. So
Mm,
this particular strategy of making things a bit disfluent can actually decrease returns because it will definitely increase post-purchase satisfaction.
mm. Interesting. Okay. Okay. And so it has a lot of implications on the marketing side.
Hmm.
It may also have some implications, as you say, in sort of in a business
Hmm.
context,
Yep.
right? What you're saying more generally is that people feel they have done a good job
Mm-hmm.
if they have done if they spend a lot of
Mm-hmm.
effort in a situation where there are choices and all choices are sort of equally complicated, so to speak.
Yes.
Um, so the alternative there would be in a situation where all choices are equally simple.
Mm-hmm.
It will be sort of a random choice, and in your computer laptop
Mm-hmm.
example, you would argue that if everything is well written and really simple to understand, they make a choice very quickly, they take one, go home, but the likelihood of them returning is a lot higher
Yes.
in that case.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so what's the what's the prescription for shops?
Well, I am the one who just work on research paper. They are just tools, and
Yeah.
no tool can be directly used without understanding the context. There's no tool in the world. So
Right.
I will be very, very apprehensive to give a general prescription. But yes, I am
Right.
often approached by companies to, for certain solutions in certain contexts. So
Yeah.
based on the situation, based on the context, I can give the prescription. So I'm just
Okay.
ducking that question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are some sort of game theoretic aspects here too. If if the different computer
Mhm.
manufacturers have a choice as to how they display their
Yeah.
products, um, how they do that is really related to how others do it.
Absolutely,
It sounds
and
to me as that way. Yeah.
absolutely, and just to make that game theory problem more complicated, every computer manufacturer
Yeah.
has different kinds of laptop lines. Like
Mm.
Dell has Inspiron, Dell has XPS, Dell has Vostro. So
Right.
how they actually control the fluency of the messages for each of these lines can be a challenge for them
Yeah.
as well.
Right. 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 So I guess going back to the simpler idea, a fluency customer actually likes that. So in the Dell case, when they have multiple lines, and if they have a need to push one line, either because of higher levels of supply or better profit margins or whatever, do they actually sort of do this on one line and not the others?
Basically, I'm not sure whether companies at in the current times are using
Yeah.
disfluency as a strategy.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they are using fluency as a strategy for sure. But in your question,
Yeah.
you're asking me whether they make one line fluent and the others disfluent. I'm not
Right.
sure
Right.
any company is using disfluency as a tool as of now.
Right. Okay.
So again, the answer to that question will be something that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's jump into another
Yeah.
paper. Numerosity and allocation behavior insights using a dictator
Yeah.
game. You say you investigate how the numerosity bias influences individuals' allocation of resources between themselves and others using the backdrop of the traditional dictator game. What exactly is a dictator
So
game?
dictator game is an economic game. I will just
Yeah.
explain the game to you. So suppose
Yeah.
I am a player. The experimenter gives me $10, and
Mhm.
my task is to give some amount of that money to you. You are
Yeah.
another player. Now I
Mhm.
control the allocations as player one. So I have
Mhm.
$10. I can keep some of it, and I can give you some of it.
Mhm.
And there's absolutely nothing that player two, which in this case is you, can do about it.
Mhm.
So, in a completely normative sense, I should not give you anything and
Right.
keep those $10 for myself. And in a completely normative uh, scenario, you should be happy if you get any non-zero amount. Anything above zero, you should be happy. But
Right.
even then, it has been shown that in a dictator game, player one gives some money to player two, about
Mhm.
20 to 30%. So in this paper, what we had done, we had used this context of dictator game, and we have seen the concept of numerosity. Now, what is numerosity? Numerosity simply means that we think that entities which are described by bigger numbers are bigger in magnitudes, which means
Right.
if I say that I have 1 year to turn in the paper versus I have 365 days to turn in the paper, I will feel that I have a lot of time when you tell me I have 365 days to turn in the paper, because 365 happens to be a bigger number. Now, again,
Right.
numerosity bias is something that has been shown before as well by multiple researchers in the area. We have shown numerosity effect in the context of allocation. And what better game to use in the context of allocation than dictator game? So in this paper, what we showed was that if you give me $10, if the experimenter gives player one $10, and asks me to allocate some money to player two, yes, I will be giving like about $3 to player two, which is in line with what past research has shown. But instead of $10, if you tell me that I have been given 1,000 cents to allocate, 1,000 cents to allocate, I will be giving less money to the other player. So,
That's So first of all, the dictator game. So the 30% allocation the dictator makes is sort of fairness type
absolutely,
reasoning,
absolutely,
right? So that is what the expectation is. And what you're arguing is that when you have 1,000 cents, it's 1,000 cents. Yeah, when you have 1,000 cents, they give less, presumably because if they give 300 cents, it looks big
absolutely,
to them.
absolutely.
On the other hand, though, won't they also think that the remaining 7,000 is also big?
700.
So why
Remaining
is the
700.
3,000?
So
Okay,
again, Gil,
yeah,
I can't agree more with you. So what we had done in this paper, we had a separate. Obviously, every paper has multiple studies. So in this
yeah,
paper, another study, in one of the other studies, what we had done, we had asked participants to focus on their own share and not on the other person's share. So instead of asking them how much money you will give player B, we asked them how much money will you keep for yourself. And again, in this case, going with your intuition, people actually kept less money for themselves in the cents condition and ended up
right,
allocating more money to the other person in the cents condition. So because
right,
again,
right,
like you rightly mentioned, 700 cents seemed very big. So they said, yeah, 700 is pretty big. Let me just reduce that.
right,
So
right.
the focus, it all dependent. The focus actually acted as a moderator. If the focus is on player two, cents condition resulted in less money for player two. If the focus is on player one, it's himself or herself, cents condition resulted in more money for player two.
Right, right. So, yeah, I also wondered in both of these papers, on this one more than
Mhm.
the other, the
Yeah.
previous one, did you look at any sort of controls like education or scientific, profession or whatever? Did you see any difference between, people with PhDs and so on? I'm just just thinking
Yeah.
aloud, whether they don't have this type of an
So you are
issue.
talking about numeracy. Now, numeracy, although
Yeah.
it sounds similar to numerosity, but it's a very different concept. Numeracy means how comfortable we are with concepts of mathematics. So by your question, I understand whether how comfortable people are with mathematics. Will this effect go away? So
Yeah.
in this paper,
Yeah.
we have not looked at any controls as such based on
Yeah.
numeracy. But yes, if I can cite other papers, then numeracy often plays a role in framing biases. My third paper, which I had sent you, was on framing, attribute framing. And there is some work
Yeah.
by other researchers which shows that numeracy can many times influence the effects that I have shown. So people who are extremely high on numeracy, they will probably less, they will be less, I should say, we will see this effect less with that population which is high on numeracy, because immediately it will be very difficult for us, for the experimenters, to make them focus on only one player. They will be focusing on both players simultaneously.
Right, right. Um, Gaurav, I think I figured out the issue. What the issue might be? It might be that do you have the volume on your computer too loud? I think it might be a feedback issue.
That,
Can
yeah,
you
I have
reduce
reduced the volume now.
reduce it? Okay, okay. So you mentioned the attribute framing paper. So let's get into that. So that is entitled "Revisiting Attribute Framing: The Impact of Number Roundness on Framing." And so you're looking at, you say we compare the impact of round and non-round numbers using a communication message on consumers' evaluations and judgments towards associated target entity. You want to talk a bit about what that paper?
So attribute framing was actually shown by two of my co-authors, Arvind Levin and Gary Gates, even before I was born. It was in early 1980s. They had shown, they had demonstrated attribute framing. Now, first, let me explain what is attribute framing before I get to the findings of my paper. So suppose, let's say you are inviting a friend of yours for dinner and you want to make beef lasagna for your friend, and you go to the market to look for beef. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
many of the beef options in the supermarket may be labeled as 80% lean beef. On the same At the same time, some beef can be labeled as 20% fat beef. Now, depending on what you are looking, now 80% lean beef is same as 20% fat beef. They are objectively same, isn't it? So similarly, 80% students cheating in an exam is same as 20% students not cheating in the exam. 80% success rate is same as 20% failure rate. So these are attribute frames. Coming back to the example, if you are looking for a lean option, a healthier option, you are more likely to pick up the beef which is labeled as 80% lean, because you will think that 80% lean beef is healthier than 20% fat beef, just because lean as an attribute is closely related to health, whereas fat has been shown to be related to tasty. So if you are
Right.
looking for a tastier beef, you are more likely to pick the 20% fat beef. So this was attribute framing. Now, in attribute framing has been shown many times the last 3 to 4 decades, and it is used by marketeers all the time. Whether you want to lose
Yeah.
weight or whether you want to get into a great shape, these are the attributes that a gym would use in its communications. What I have done in this paper, I realized that in all the research papers in academia and as well as in the corporate world, people generally use round numbers with attribute framing. They use, going with our example, they will use 80% lean or 20% fat, 90% lean or 10% fat, only round numbers. So I started focusing on numbers because these numbers are an important part of an attribute frame. Yes, attribute is very important. Lean versus fat is extremely important, but even the number is a very useful part of these attribute frames. So my research question was, will it make a difference if instead of using 80% and 20%, I use specific numbers such as 81.56% and 18.44%, or any other specific numbers? Will that make a difference? Will it increase attribute framing? Will it decrease attribute framing? And this paper got published in a very good journal because we found some surprising and some very, very interesting findings. What we found is that in a between subject experiment, we found that people generally think that 81.56% lean beef is less lean than 80% lean beef, which is definitely wrong, isn't it? So, using specific numbers was actually decreasing the attitudes of consumers towards the target product in the positive frames as well as in the negative frames.
So is it? I don't know if you can answer this, but is it because it's more complex to
Basically,
understand?
the
Is that
process
the reason?
account, the underlying mechanism for this, we had like multiple studies in this paper as well. And most of these studies
Yeah.
were to explain the underlying mechanism. And this paper got published in a very good journal just because we were able to explain the underlying mechanism. So phenomenon was interesting.
Mm.
Going to the underlying mechanism, like you mentioned, it follows in multiple steps. So first of all, specific numbers are more difficult to be processed. More important than that, specific numbers in such contexts catch our attention, catch customers. So when I look at a particular
Mm.
message which says, there's an 80% success rate of this particular strategy, 80% doesn't even catch my attention. But if you say
Mm.
81.56% success rate, that number will definitely catch my attention. The moment something catches my attention, so we use eye tracking and other strategies to show that specific number is catching more attention. But then
Yeah.
what happens when something catches my attention? I have to make sense of it, isn't it? Now, if something has caught my
Mm.
attention, I actually have to make sense of it. How can I make sense of a
Mm.
random number, 81.56% or any other number? I immediately, I immediately compare it with the ideal number. Now,
Mm.
what is the ideal percentage of a lean beef? It's 100% lean beef, isn't it? So I will
Mm.
compare 81.56% lean with 100% lean. And we showed in multiple studies this comparison step. And the real
Mm.
beef will always fall short of the ideal beef, and that is why this
Right.
beef gets penalized. So using specific numbers in the positive frame, in the lean frame, is bad. Now let's see what happens on the negative on the other side. Suppose instead
Mm.
of using 20% fat beef, I say this beef is 18.44% fat beef. Yeah,
Mm.
I will compare it directly with 0% fat beef. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wondered. I'm just thinking about myself. If I see that, my instinctual reaction would be to round that up to
Yes.
20. Maybe both happen.
Yes. So basically, there is a lot of research on in numerical cognition which shows that human beings, when they don't have enough, motivation, they actually round numbers up. Yeah. But
Yeah.
many times it does not happen. That's why odd
Mm.
pricing is so successful. If people start rounding up,
Mm.
prices like $5.99 will be quoted as $6, and nobody
Right.
will be
Yeah.
using odd pricing. But we see that odd pricing are used everywhere. So
Mm.
yes, people round, but more often than not, they don't. And that's why
Right.
odd pricing is so prevalent in marketing. So in our paper, we saw that people are trying hard to make sense of these numbers. They are paying attention. When we did eye
Yeah.
tracking study, they were looking at these numbers for a longer duration. Uh, they had a
Right.
big, large. They had a higher memory of these numbers, which means they coded them well, and they could compare.
Mm.
And they were actually comparing these numbers with ideal numbers. And we also tested that using our some of our studies. People did
Mm.
not even see the word 100% lean. Still, they could recognize 100% lean at a very fast speed, which means they thought about 100% lean recently. So we did. I mean, these were all the tools that we had used. The studies were a bit complex for me to explain them in such a short duration of time. But the point was that people were actually trying to compare these attributes, these non-round attributes with the ideal attributes, and that's why they were penalizing the objects, the target objects, the target brands. So is the prescription, one would think that the prescription from our side is don't use, not to use non-round numbers at all. But this prescription is not right. In many cases, you want attitude towards the target product to go lower. That you are an organization which wants people to reduce smoking. So instead of saying that, about 8% children will be suffering from asthma due to passive smoking, we should actually give the real numbers. The 7.82% children will suffer from asthma due to passive smoking. The attitude towards smoking, passive smoking, will go down in this case.
So that's because, again, they're comparing 7.82
Yes.
with 0.
Yeah.
That is right. Okay. And a round number, it's almost like a sort of a lazy view. The brain is not catching it, it just sort of
Mm-hmm.
filing it away and
Yeah.
not really thinking about it. When you add complexity to it, you are then forced to analyze that number, so to speak. And then when you analyze it, you have a number that you're thinking
Yeah,
about, which
because
is
you
0,
don't have
not
anything, any other
typically.
context. If I give you some other context,
Right.
probably you will use that information. But in the absence of any information, you'll move towards the information that is most available to you.
Hmm. So, so we talked about kind of three different things in terms of marketing communications, and both in terms of pricing, in terms of people making decisions. If you sort
Mhm.
of combine all of this in conclusion, Gaurav, how would you, what would be your view as to, if somebody is thinking about pricing and communicating a new product, let's say it's a completely new product, what would be the features, both of that communication as well as the
Well,
pricing
I would
strategy?
strongly say that, first of all, try if I see all these findings by a single lens, I would say that numbers have a language of
Yeah.
their own. So numbers are not only used to communicate quantitative properties, but they have certain associations. Some numbers can be kind, some numbers can be cruel, some numbers can be sharp, some numbers can be smooth, some numbers can be feminine, some numbers can be masculine. And all these associations are studied in the field of numerical cognition. And numerical cognition studies many other aspects of numbers as well, apart from these associations. So I would say that, coming to your central question, when somebody is coming up with a new product, they should be using numbers very, very carefully. So if they're deciding on the price, yes, they should do
Yeah.
their pricing research. I'm a marketing research professor. I spend like 6 classes of my semester on pricing research. How should a company decide on the pricing? But at the end, when you have come down to the number, think about that number as well. How to actually show your pricing? Is it a good idea to show that you will get 12 pens for $6, or should you go and say that you will get 1 dozen pens for $6? Or I would go a step further and I will ask the company to think that should you say that we are giving you 12 pens for $6, or should you say that we are giving you, you know, the offer is $6 for 12 pen? What should be the order? And there is research and marketing. There
Mm.
is research and marketing which has looked at these kind of effects. There is research in numerical cognition which looks at these kind of effects. So I would say I would say that use the numbers very, very carefully because they have their own associations. And numbers are not only included while communicating pricing. Even irrelevant
Right.
sounding numbers such as SKU number, serial number of a product, order number,
Mhm.
these are the numbers that can impact consumers' judgment, consumers' decision making. In one of my other papers, which was a part of my dissertation, I looked at the presence of numerical
Yeah.
landmarks. Now, we all know about physical landmarks. If you ever come to Albany, Troy, where my university is located, in the capital region of New York, and ask me the way to RPI, I'll tell you RPI is the oldest university in engineering. You can ask anyone. You would say, no, I don't want to ask anyone. You tell me the way to RPI. And I would tell you, okay,
Mm.
the way I will explain you the way to RPI will be something like this. Yeah, take Route 7, you will see a clock tower. Take a right from that, right after that clock tower, you will come across a Sunoco gas station. Take a left from that Sunoco gas station,
Mm.
you will come across a old red brick church, and so on. Basically, I will be using these
Yeah.
landmarks. And these landmarks are very, very important in spatial cognition. And they have certain properties. Physical landmarks can be recalled very easily. They catch attention.
Mm.
Information associated with these physical landmarks is coded in our brain at greater depth. So I will know that the old church is a red brick church. Ask me about any other building on that road, I will not know the color of that building. And most importantly, these physical
Mm.
landmarks can act as decision nodes. They can nudge you to make a decision. So in this paper of mine, I wondered whether numerical cognition will have certain features similar to spatial cognition because it
Mm.
has been shown that numerical cognition is associated with spatial cognition in many ways. In fact, we use the same cortical metrics, we use the same parts of the brains to process space and to process numbers. Does that mean that we will
Mm.
have numerical landmarks as well, just like we have spatial landmarks? Does that mean that these numerical landmarks will also have similar properties? Are there any numbers which can be coded in our brain with greater details? Are there numbers which catch our attention?
Mm.
And more importantly, can there be any numbers which can nudge me to make a decision? So, this is what I've shown in that particular paper. It is a part of my dissertation. And coming back to your
Yeah.
question, even irrelevant looking numbers can make me can actually nudge me to make a decision because some numbers can
Mm.
actually act like landmarks.
So, what's the basis for that? I can think of a sort of an
Mhm.
evolutionary basis for it. So what do you think is the basis
So
for those
basically,
things?
we did not look at the reasoning why numerical landmarks are associated with spatial landmarks, just because there has been a lot of research
Yeah.
which has looked at the reasoning. And as you mentioned, a lot of it gives evolutionary based uh, underlying mechanism. So when we were evolving,
Mm.
the first thing we had to take care was space and time. We had to understand the concept of space and time. How far should I actually throw the arrow so that it hits the deer? Or how much time do
Mm.
I have left before the sun sets, before I actually get to my cave back? So while we were, so we started
So
having our
yeah.
the cortical hardware in our mind started evolving for
Mm.
uh, space and time. And then later on, we had to make sense of other things such as society, such as relationships, such as numbers. We came across different modalities, different concepts. And human beings, there is something called cortical recycling, which means we always try to use the existing hardware to understand new concepts. So when these new concepts started coming up and we had to understand numbers, we had to understand other things, we started using the same hardware that was already there with us. So that's why numeric. Yeah,
Right,
go ahead.
right.
Sorry.
And so, no, so the heuristics that, as you say, has some sort of importance, numerical importance in our mind, could have some correlations to sort of the scale of early humans. Like you say, how far did they travel? How far did they see? How far did they attack an animal? How long did they walk? So all of those may have created some heuristics that we are now sort of
Absolutely.
repackaging in the modern context. And so
So
there is a
yeah,
whole area of
evolutionary
research there
psychology is
to
a
understand
completely
things.
different area which looks at extremely good and interesting process mechanisms grounded in evolutionary explanations.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. This has been great, Gaurav.
Sure.
Thanks so much for spending time with me,
Thank you.
and
Thanks a
good
lot.
luck
Thanks
with
a
all
lot,
this
Gil.
research.
And thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Sure.